Hello good people, welcome back to my channel The Nature and the Wild. So if you're just starting the photography and want to know what will be the next step, what are the aspects of photographies, what kind of photography gear we should use, what are the settings we should use, and to get more in depth of the photography genre, then next 20 to 25 minutes is very important for you. We are going to discuss the basics of photography and we are going to deep dive into it. So please stay tuned with me. So guys, let's start. The first thing we need to understand what is photography all about. Photography, in one word definition, to capture any moment at the right time that should tell a story and that can be presentable to your audience. So there are different genres of photography we have. We have street photography, we have wildlife photography, portfolio photography, product photography, wedding photography, and every photography has its different aspects, and we should know the basics of photographies, the settings, the terminologies we're gonna use in this photography course. So the first thing first is the gear. If you're new into this genre, the first we need a camera, but to buy a camera we must understand what kind of camera we should buy. There are two types of camera right now in the market. One is a DSLR camera, another is the mirrorless camera. So DSLR camera stands for digital single lens reflex. It uses a mirror mechanism. So what does it mean? That means the light which is passing through your lens first comes to the mirror, and from the mirror it goes to a sensor, and from there you see your image on a live view. So on the other hand, the mirrorless cameras, you don't have that mirror. The light directly comes onto your sensor and you see the image on the back of your camera. So most of the DSLR cameras are the old age and mirrorless are the new age cameras. But still the DSLR cameras are pretty good. Like we have different kind of cameras, like Nikon produced couple of DSLR cameras. Canon has a lot of nice DSLR camera like Canon 90D, 5D Mark IV. Those are quite a good competitive cameras in the market. Other hand, the mirrorless cameras, the Nikon has the G series right now, and Canon has the R series, R7, R8, R10, R5. So those cameras are ahead of the market, and their whole system is quite advanced. Now the question comes, what camera should I buy? If you look at the point of money factor, DSLR cameras are still good and cheaper options than the mirrorless cameras. So as a beginner photography, it's quite recommended that you go with a DSLR camera. But you are already a mediator level and you want to upgrade yourself, being a professional photographer, you should go with the mirrorless cameras, because that's the next generation of the cameras going to be produced. All the DSLR cameras, they are quite good. They have optical viewfinder. They are quite cheaper in the market. You can easily buy the second hands with the cheap conditions. And but the mirrorless cameras are more advanced. They have the more autofocus systems, the new age autofocus systems, which can track everything. Know about the cameras, we also need to understand what kind of lenses we should use, because a camera, you will only get a camera body in the market and need to buy a lens to operate it. There are two kind of lens in the market. One, we have a zoom lens and another is a prime lens. So what is the main difference between that? A prime lens has a fixed focal length. You cannot extend the focal length of the prime lens. The zoom lens, it's variable. Like here in my hand, I have a lens which is Sigma 17 by 70 mm, and if you move it, it is 17 mm, and when you unfold it, it goes all the way out, and that's become 70 mm. The prime lenses also has a fixed aperture. We will talk in the later module what is an aperture. So they have a fixed aperture, but the zoom lens, they have a variable aperture. Again, on this lens I have 2.8 to 4.5 aperture. So according to your scenarios, your need, you should buy the lenses of your choice. Let's say you are a portfolio photographer or product photographer, then you can always go with the prime lenses, 85 mm, 24 by 70 mm lenses, or the lens which has the lower f-stop number, aperture number. If you are a wildlife photographer, then you must go with the higher focal length, 100 by 500, 600 mm, 400 mm. Those lenses are pretty much useful in the real life world. The next topic is the exposure triangle. Exposure triangle is going to affect the overall image quality of your camera. It basically has three pillars: the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO. Let's talk about shutter speed. Shutter speed is the amount of time your camera is open and the amount of light is coming inside your camera. So if your shutter speed is open for longer time, that means there is more light coming in your camera and make the picture more brighter. And if your shutter is open for less time, so less light is coming inside and make your picture darker. But that's not only the case. It's also affect the quality of picture. If your shutter speed is slow, you will get a shaky or blurry image. And if your shutter speed is high, then you will get very nice and crisp image where the subject is completely freeze. So if you have to shoot a light trail or a Milky Way, a waterfall, then you should use the slow shutter speed functionality. Many photographers use that and get a very nice picture. But if you have to shoot a sports program where you need to freeze the subject, a moving car, or a flying bird, then you must use higher shutter speed. Shutter speed is denoted with a number 1 by 3, 1 by 2, 1 by 10, 20, and it goes on till 4000, 8000, and some cameras support more. It's a fraction of seconds. So in essence, if you need a blurry image or different kind of composition, you use the slow shutter. And if you need a perfect image with the subject is freeze, you will need to use high shutter speed. So that brings up the next topic. The next pillar of exposure triangle is aperture. What is an aperture? Aperture is the amount of opening your lens. With the F number, normally you can see if you buy a lens, you will see like f1.8, f2.0, or f2.8, f4, f6, f9. So those are the aperture. Lower the value like f1.8, 2.0, the more light will come through your lens and it's give you a nicer picture. If you have more aperture, f9, f10, f11, then those lenses will allow less light and you will struggle in the low light conditions. So it depends what kind of aperture lens we should use according to your need. If you are shooting indoor and lot of wedding photographies, then you must lens which a lower aperture number. Normally a Canon 24 by 70 lens is pretty good, or you can use 85 mm f1.8. If you are a wildlife photographer or a sports photographer, you can use a Canon lens 100 by 400 with f4, which is pretty good lens and allow a lot of light. So it's not only effect on your image, it's also affect the quality of your image. So if you have a lower f-stop number lens, your image will be more isolated than the background. Your background will be more blurry, nice bokeh effect you will get. And if your lens has more aperture number, then the background and the foreground, there will be no differences. So if you really into the portfolio product photography, or you are into the portrait photography, then you must use a lens which has lower aperture number. Is amount of light your camera will get, how brighter or darker your picture will be. It varies between the number of 100 to 25,000. Some cameras are more. All the modern age cameras, they have very high ISO tolerance, so they can bump up to more values as you want. When you're shooting with high ISO, although you will get more light on your picture, but it will also introduce a lot of noises that will degrade the picture quality. But in the post processing, there are very different nice tools where we can eliminate those noises to get a nice presentable image. Question comes, how are we going to use this ISO? So let's say you are a wildlife photographer, you went out and in the day it's a quite sunny. You set your ISO between 200 to 500 and you check your exposure meter if it's say staying in the middle. So in the broad daylight, the between 200 to 500 ISO is more than enough. You have enough light. But even in the evening, when the sun is going down, the light is not that good condition or it's a cloudy outside, you have to bump up your ISO to make most nice and clean image. And when you bump up to 3200, 6400, it will introduce the noise, but don't worry about it. So these are some scenarios where you can use the ISO. The next topic is very important. From the exposure triangle, now we come to the camera modes. Now we know what is the shutter speed, what is the ISO, what is the aperture. So we must understand how to use them on your camera. If you see the black dial on your camera, there are some. M is the manual mode, then you have the aperture priority, and then you have the shutter priority mode. Let's talk about the shutter priority mode. In the shutter priority mode, your shutter speed is manual. You can control the shutter speed according to your need from your camera. And when you use this mode, other two parameters, the aperture and ISO, are the automatic. So camera will decide according to the scene what will be your desired aperture and what will be your ISO. This is a pretty good solution if you are shooting birds in flight or fast moving object. Next is the aperture priority. In the aperture priority mode, what's going to happen? Your aperture you are going to change. So let's say you are shooting in a couple mode. You have to shoot a lot of people in the frame. You can set your aperture with your lens, and rest your shutter speed and ISO will be determined by your camera automatically according to your scene. Next one is the manual mode, where everything is manual. You need to set each and every parameter according to your need, according to your atmosphere, your scenery, your photography type. And I think this is the most important mode. When we start as a beginner, we should play with it, because as much as we play with these parameters, we will understand more deeply how they are affecting the whole scenario. The topic is metering. What is the metering mode? The metering mode, how your camera is going to evaluate the lighting conditions to maintain the right exposure of your image. Normally every DSLR or mirrorless cameras, they have this metering mode inside. So on the Canon camera, you get a evaluate metering, then you have a partial metering, then you have a spot metering, and center weighted average metering. What does it mean? By default, the first metering mode, your camera is set to evaluate metering. In this, the camera, when you point out to a subject, you focus on it, your camera try to read the lighting conditions, the exposure conditions, overall the whole image on your screen, and then give you an exposure meter. According to that metering, you set up your shutter speed or your shutter, your ISOs or your aperture. This is a default mode. The next one is the center weighted, which is very good. In the center weighted, when you focus to the center of a subject, it only read the lighting conditions center of your screen, not the whole screen or whole image, and adjust the exposure accordingly. We use then center weighted. Center weighted is very good metering mode during the photography when the sunlight is coming from your behind, or you have to do a headshot. You focus on the head and it will only read the lighting condition around the head and give you the reading. According to your reading, you can change your parameters. The third one is very important, spot metering. And most of the wildlife photography we shoot when the small birds, it is very useful, because when you focus on the bird, your camera don't need to read all the exposure, all the lighting conditions outside the bird's area. It will only read the lighting conditions on the bird on your focus point and try to make sure that you have the right exposure. I use it a lot during my bird photography, and that's give me the most exposed or proper exposed photos. So spot metering is quite useful in this kind of scenarios. Since metering is how your camera is going to read out the light and the atmosphere to give you the proper exposures so you can have a nice and crisp image. Pick up our new camera. The first point, we need to set up the picture quality. So a camera can shoot in the JPEG and a RAW mode. So JPEG is a quick processed image out of your camera with all the balanced color gradings. You don't need to do a lot of post processing on the images, and RAW is the most raw images you get from your camera, which is unbalanced, but it gives you a lot of room to play with the brights to the darkest part and with the contrast to adjust the exposure of the image during the post process. Always try to shoot as a beginner in the RAW. It will give you more room to do more stuff with your images. And that drives us to set up the next setting on your camera is the autofocus setting. You must set up your camera to focus automatically. Nowadays every lens and every camera is compatible to each other and they can autofocus very fast. So you must make sure that your autofocus operation on your camera is set to automatic. If it is on manual, you cannot be able to automatic focus by pressing the shutter button. The next option, you must choose the autofocus area. Here there are a couple of autofocus area on every camera, whether it's a DSLR or any brand you can pick up. The first one is the spot autofocus. So what does it mean? Spot autofocus is the spot on your subject. You pick up your camera, you select the subject, focus on it, your camera stick to the focus to the subject. That is the spot autofocus. But if you have a moving subject, what you gonna do? The moving subject need more area to focus in. Then there are a couple of other options like expand the autofocus area, where you can manually choose from your camera joystick button which area specifically you want to focus, or you can use couple of zones on Canon camera. You have zone 1, zone 2 and zone 3. These are relatively wider area to focus. So especially on my case, when I do a bird in flight or animal is moving too fast, I want to capture it, I use mostly zone 3, which give me more area to focus in and make sure that everything is in focus. That brings to the next topic, animal tracking. So I always, if I'm shooting a portrait, I put my tracking to the human, and if I shoot an animal, I put my tracking to the animal. It allows the camera to understand what kind of subject we are going to shoot, and that allow to track us the animal or track the eye of the human. So on the camera you must set up your autofocus tracking and the eye detection on. Throughout this whole time, if you're still staying with me on this video, we have learned about the cameras, we learned about the lenses, what kind of lens, what kind of camera we should use for different photography genres. Then we learned about the camera modes, we learned about the metering, the lighting settings, exposure triangle, and now we just learned about the autofocus. Customize your one button from the very beginning, put it in your practice. Move the autofocus setting from the shutter button to your back button. When you do that, you have more control and more controlled focus of your subject, and you can click more nicer pictures. There is another video on my channel, you can check back button autofocus setup and why we need that. One more important topic we must discuss here is the composition of the image. We will take different pictures, but we also have to think about the atmosphere, how the picture background is looking, where the light is coming behind, or light is coming from the front, or is it coming on my subject directly, because this kind of compositions make a huge impact on your image quality. So always try to shoot when you see the subject is properly exposed and you see it from your own eyes. how does it look. Try to have a more nice and colorful background, or use lower aperture lenses to make it more blurred so that your subject can stand out from the background. So image composition is very important, and that's the presentation you are going to show to your audience. Look at this picture. When I take it, I try to make this picture more isolated. I try to make the corners more darker so that my subject can stand out. I try to make sure that each and every detail can be properly visible from this picture. So I use a proper exposure when I was capturing. So these all things put in your understanding, and then you have a very proper and composed image. At the very end, what we can use to edit those pictures, you take a picture, you went out very nice, while properly exposed, looking very good on your camera. Now the post processing, you can use Lightroom, you can use Photoshop. There are plenty of softwares, but as a professional photographer, we always try to Lightroom. I use a lot, and it's pretty good software. You can get subscriptions, monthly subscription. You can pretty much play with your all images. It supports the raw image. You import your image to your laptop or your computer, and then when you import it into the Lightroom, you can see the image. You can play with its brightness, its contrast, color, hue, saturations. You can play with its sharpness. You can correct the lens aberrations. So there are a lot of things to do inside the Lightroom and make a very proper and export the image from the Lightroom as a JPEG for your all platforms. So guys, thanks a lot. Thank you for staying with me so long. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and please put your question, your comments in the comment box. I will try to give them answer, and we'll come back next time with more interesting topics. And if you have any kind of questions about your camera, gear, settings, setups, please drop you in the comment box and I will get back to you. Thanks a lot.